anxiety about saying black Americans. Actually, I don't really see black Americans. I think, let me make a suggestion here. I think the suggestion is this. When you see somebody who is black of color, think of it this way. I see Peter, who is a man who is black. I see Mary or Jane or Shaniqua, doesn't make any difference, who is a woman, who is named Shaniqua or whatever her name is, Mary or Jane, and she is black. She's a woman and she's black. You see, black is a descriptor. It's not a definer. Black shouldn't be the definition. When the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, let me say this too, it's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Don't dishonor this man. I know a lot of people want to call him Martin Luther King, or they want to call him Dr. King, Dr. King is not respecting him. He worked very hard to get his bachelor's degree. He worked very hard to get his master's, his divinity degree, and he worked very hard to get his doctoral degree, which were all earned degrees. They weren't honorary. And so the Reverend, that's his title, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, that's really what it is. I know it's a lot to say, but if you really want to honor the man, then give him his due and his title. His entire title, his full title. And don't make him a secularist or a Gandhi nonviolent protester. He wasn't. He was a pastor. He was the pastor of a church. He was a preacher. He was a teacher. He was a theologian. He was a seminary graduate. And don't take that away from him. He deserves those credits because that's who he was and what he was and what he had and the way in which he identified himself. He was a civil rights leader, yes, but that's after being a Christian, after being a man, after being an educated man, after being a Christian man, after being a married man, after being a pastor of a church man, after being a doctor, an earned doctor, after being a reverend, etc. Then he's a civil rights activist. Way down the line of credits. He's not. So many people want to steal that from him and make him a civil rights activist. No. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, was a Christian pastor. Now, my favorite quote of his is, "There will come a day when we will not define a person by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." I believe that was the most revolutionary phrase that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, ever spoke. I believe a person, man, woman, child, should not be identified, should not be defined by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This phrase has all been forgotten. And so many people want to use his heritage, his history, and his wonderful contribution to humanity in the wrong way. We should not be calling people black Americans. We should not be calling people white Americans. We should not be calling people Asian Americans. We should say, this is John, a man, a Christian, a family member, a husband, a father, other descriptors who happens to be white or black. See, when you put the black and the white and whatever it is way down the line and list of descriptors, then you put it in the right perspective. The man is the man, and he has a name, and he deserves to be known by his name and respected accordingly by the content of his character, not the color of his skin. And those white people, and those liberal white people, and those Democrat white people, and anybody else who want to offend the memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, do it with alacrity and in ignorance, or maybe they do it in spite because they can't handle his Christian faith. They can't handle his reverendness. They can't handle his education. They can't handle his earned doctorate. They can't handle that he was a pastor of a church, a preacher. You see? These are the things that he was. And when we forget them, and when we don't honor them, we do a terrible disservice to him and to the Reverend Dr. Ralph Abernathy and the like more. These people deserve their titles. They earn them. And if you're going to respect them, then use them appropriately. Okay, what this whole broadcast has been about is respect. It's not about white guilt. It's not about shame. It's not about privilege and all that baloney. It's about respect and appreciation. We need to respect each other. And I think we do, by and large, in society. I know when I was raised up in the Bronx of New York, we respected each other. Yeah, we had our jokes about this or that, or we had our little stupidities that we use, meaningless phraseology. But basically, none of us would hurt the other person because they were Italian or German, or because they were white or black, or because they were from Asia or the like. Nobody would even think of that. How could you have a stickball game in the middle of the streets of New York if you're going to discriminate against people by color or racial category or ethnicity or country of origin? You would never have a decent stickball game, so we overcame that very quickly in New York City. And I think we need that in America. We have to reject the racial identification of black, and we have to and black minority and black oppressed, all that business. That's just non-productive. And we have to reject white and white privilege and white supremacy and all that garbage, because that's not productive either. Let's get back to calling each other by our names, by our given names, by our family names, and let's regard each other as the neighbors that we are. And Americans, congratulations, we do that. We do that. But the people who are hogging the press and hogging the social media, and people of position, let's call them, whether they're academic positions in colleges or political position in government or part of the social fabric positions or religious positions, bishops, archbishops, and the like more, are abusing us. They're abusing us, and they're hurting us, and they don't care about us, all the while claiming that what they are is they are promoting their own prejudices and their own narrow-mindedness and their own predilections and their own political viewpoints, and claiming that those items which I just listed, which belong to them personally, individually, they belong to all of us, or they should belong to all of us. And so I should regard myself as a white, privileged person who must grovel and get on my knees in front of Black Lives Matter and kiss their boot. No way, Jose. And the same way that we should not regard anybody else to do that as well. And so, friends, this is what I'm getting. I think you get the point. It's a passion with me. I feel it very strongly. And I felt it that way since my childhood when Mrs. Herbert Morris, a woman, Mrs. Morris was a wonderful woman, a wife, a mother, a PTA member, an activist in the public school library system, and she was black. And she was my caretaker. My mother had to work in the afternoons until she didn't get home until 5 o'clock. And so from 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock for about 7 years of my life, Mrs. Morris was my caretaker. And her son Herbie and I were the best of friends and remain so to this day. So, you know, I speak from experience, personal experience, and I appreciate them, Mr. and Mrs. Morris and Herbie, her son, and I appreciate all of those wonderful people who live in the projects, and you can go on and on and on. We need to appreciate each other, my dear friends. We can do this. And so if you can, share this podcast with others, tell others about this podcast, send it to others on their emails or through their message system, promote this podcast, The Frederick Henry Show. This is one citizen voter of the United States of America, sharing ideas and viewpoints and having a conversation with you. It's a one-way conversation, I admit. I cannot pay for a two-way conversation. I'm not any of the talk show hosts. I don't have a call screener. I don't have a call-in number. I do have a website. It's called The Frederick Henry Show at WordPress.com. Very clumsy, much too long, and I know most people can't get there. The Frederick, F-R-E-D-E-R-I-C-K, Frederick Schoenfeld, S-C-H, it's the Frederick Henry. The Frederick Henry, Henry, the Frederick Henry Show.com at Yahoo. And if you can't get to it, which a lot of people can't, I'm trying to repair that, but if you have a like button on your podcast, please let me know by clicking it if you think this is meaningful. If you have a area to subscribe to this podcast, we're on Applecast, we're on Castbox, we're on all Google and all that kind of stuff, iHeartRadio, then put this in your favorites. And in that way, you'll be helping. I don't ask for money. I just ask for participation and support, and eventually I hope to be able to get feedback as well. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast about African Americans or people from Africa, which country and nation, North Africa, Mid-Africa, South Africa, West Coast Africa, East Coast Africa, Mediterranean Africa. There's a lot of Africa. And we need to understand that and appreciate that if we're going to honor people of African descent. And so again, thank you very much for listening. And this is Frederick Henry, and you're listening to the Frederick Henry Podcast Show. Thank you very much.